The letter lay flat on my kitchen table, a stark white rectangle in the Monday morning sun. My son Gary stood over me, his shadow falling across the page. "See, Dad? It's official," he said, his voice slick with triumph. "I'm your court-appointed fiduciary. That's $4,200 a month of your VA benefits that I'll be managing for you from now on." He tapped the paper with a manicured finger. The sound a sharp, final crack in the quiet room. A low chuckle rumbled in his chest. "Don't you worry," he sneered. "I'll put it to good use. Better than you just letting it sit in the bank, gathering dust like everything else in this house." The laughter wasn't meant to be shared. It was a weapon, each note a little twist of the knife. The situation felt absolute. A door slammed shut and bolted from the other side. My own son, looking at me like I was already a ghost. The document was from the Department of Veterans Affairs, the eagle seal embossed at the top shimmering in a sunbeam. Gary slid it closer to me, as if I hadn't understood. Signed, sealed, and delivered. The judge agreed with my assessment. "It's done." He spread his hands wide, a magnanimous king claiming his tiny, worn-out kingdom. I felt the gaze of the delivery driver, who had just dropped off a package, now lingering by the door, a silent witness to my humiliation. I didn't move. My hands, wrinkled and spotted with age, lay folded on the table. A strange calm washed over me, cold and clear as a winter stream. I looked up at my son, the architect of my ruin, and a small, tight smile touched my lips. I said nothing. The silence was a thing of its own, a presence in the room that made Gary's posture stiffen. He hadn't expected this. He'd expected tears or rage, not this unnerving stillness. Gary's face soured. "What are you smiling at, old man? There's nothing left for you to do." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, but his eyes were filled with fury. "It's over." I let my gaze drift past him, to the mantelpiece over the fireplace, to a small dark box behind glass. The air grew thick with unspoken words. The moment stretched thin. But 3 months earlier, on a cold Tuesday in March, it all began. My house is small, but it's mine. Every corner holds a memory of Carol, of a life built with care. The air smells of old books and lemon polish. My routine is simple. Up at dawn, coffee, a walk if the joints allow. On the mantelpiece, amongst photos of a smiling wife and a gap-toothed boy, sits my military memorabilia. Each pin, each patch, a chapter in a story I rarely tell. It was a quiet life, an orderly one, the kind of peace you fight for. Gary arrived that Tuesday without calling first. The roar of his new sports car shattered the neighborhood's calm before he even cut the engine. He breezed in, bringing with him the sharp synthetic scent of expensive cologne that always gave me a headache. "Hey, Dad," he said, his eyes scanning the room with a familiar mix of pity and impatience. "Just checking in. Place looks the same. You look tired." His gaze swept over my things, dismissing them as clutter. It snagged on the polished cherry wood case on the mantel. "Still got this old thing, huh?" He walked over and tapped the glass, right over my bronze star medal. "What's this even for? Bet it's not even real bronze." He laughed, a short, dismissive bark. "Probably worthless. You should sell this junk, get some real art." He saw a relic. I saw a promise I had kept. I looked at the stranger wearing my son's face and remembered a different boy entirely. I saw a small 7-year-old Gary in our old rowboat on Miller's Pond, his brow furrowed in concentration as I showed him how to bait a hook. I remembered the feel of the splintered wood of the oars and the patience in my own voice. "Easy does it, son. You can't force a fish to bite." Where had that boy gone? When did patience curdle into this frantic, grasping greed? He moved on from the metal, his tone shifting to one of feigned concern. "You know, Dad, managing all these bills must be a hassle at your age. All these direct deposits from the VA, the pension, it gets him fusing, right?" He was circling, testing my defenses. It would be so much easier if someone could just handle it all for you, take the stress away. He wasn't offering to help. He was offering to take over. When he left, I found a glossy pamphlet on the coffee table he'd conveniently left behind, Patriot Senior Financial Management. The smiling faces on the cover looked predatory. A quick search on my old desktop computer revealed the fine print on their website. The founder and primary shareholder, Gary Miller. My son, this wasn't a sudden concern for my welfare. It was a business plan. A chill, deeper than the March air, settled in my bones. The phone rang a week later. It was Gary. Dad, I got an alert. You missed the electric bill. The power company sent a notice. His voice was laced with practiced disappointment. See, this is what I was worried about. Are you sure you're okay? I was looking at my checkbook register as he spoke. I'd paid it 5 days early, just like I had every month for 40 years. He was building a case, brick by insidious brick. A light rain began to fall outside, and with it came the scent of wet earth, the smell that always pulled me back to the humid jungles of Vietnam. It was a smell of mud, fear, and survival. It reminded me that there were two types of battles, the loud ones with guns and shouting, and the quiet ones, the wars of attrition, fought in the shadows. I was in a new kind of jungle now, and the enemy wore a familiar face. He brought the doctor the following Saturday. Just a friend, Dad. Dr. Evans. He was in the neighborhood. Dr. Evans had a politician's smile and cold, assessing eyes. He asked me who the current president was, to count backward from 100 by 7s, to draw a clock face. His questions were wrapped in a thin veneer of casual conversation, but I could feel the weight of each answer being logged and filed away. I was being evaluated from my own execution. The next stage of his campaign was public. We were at Henderson's Diner, a place I'd been going since it opened. When Peggy, our waitress of 30 years, came to take my order, Gary cut me off. "Who'll have the senior platter?" he said loudly, patting my hand. "My dad gets a little confused sometimes, Peggy. We have to watch out for him." She gave me a look of pure pity, and my face burned with a shame so hot it felt like a brand. That night, I stood before the mantelpiece for a long time, staring at the bronze star. I wasn't thinking of the ceremony or the commendation. I was thinking of the screaming, the mud, the weight of Sergeant Miller, no relation, on my back as I dragged him 50 yards under fire. The medal wasn't for being a hero. It was for doing a job when every instinct screamed to hide. It was a reminder of what a man does when he's cornered. I found myself talking to my late wife, a habit I'd never quite broken. A quiet whisper in the empty house. Carol would have seen right through him, I said to the empty armchair where she used to sit. In my mind, I could see her clear, steady gaze, the one that never missed a thing. She would have known exactly what to do, what to say. Her memory was a compass, and it told me this was a fight I couldn't afford to lose. Then came the official opening salvo, a thick envelope from the VA. It was a notice of potential fiduciary appointment, initiated by my son, Gary Miller. It cited a preliminary report from a Dr. Evans suggesting cognitive decline and inability to manage financial affairs. I had 30 days to contest it, but the next benefits payment, all $4,200, would be diverted in just 10 days if I failed. The ticking of the clock was deafening. My first call was to the VA helpline. I expected a bureaucratic nightmare, but I got a woman named Ms. Albright with a patient, tired voice. "Sir, you have the right to submit a counter-evaluation from your own primary care physician," she explained. "Would need that on file before the deadline." A flicker of hope ignited in my chest. Dr. Jensen had been my doctor for 20 years. He knew I was as sharp as a tack. He would vouch for me. I felt a surge of old energy. I called Dr. Jensen's office and made an appointment for the next day. I spent the evening gathering my records, 40 years of perfect credit, meticulously balanced checkbooks, investment statements. I laid them out on the dining room table like battle plans. This wasn't just about money. It was about my name, my mind, my life. I was preparing for a mission, and for the first time in months, I felt a familiar cold resolve. The call came the next morning, just as I was putting on my coat. He was the receptionist from Dr. Jensen's office, her voice strained. "Mr. Miller, I'm so sorry. We have to cancel. Dr. Jensen had a sudden family emergency, a death in the family. He's flown to Australia and will be gone for at least a month." A month. The deadline was 9 days away. I hung up the phone, a sickening certainty dawning on me. Derry's reach was longer than I had imagined. I sat on the porch as a storm rolled in, the air growing heavy and charged. The scent of rain-soaked earth filled my lungs. I felt trapped, outmaneuvered. Every door I tried to open was being locked just before I reached it. How do you fight an enemy who can buy your doctor's vacation? Despair was a heavy coat, and I was shivering beneath it. For the first time, I felt every one of my 85 years. My neighbor, a young woman named Sarah from next door, knocked on my screen door, holding a piece of mail. "Sorry, Ralph, this came to my box by mistake," she said. It was a credit card statement, addressed to Gary R. Miller, at my address. My hands trembled as I opened it. The first charge, dated 3 weeks ago, was a down payment, $12,500, for a 28-foot Barracuda fishing boat. He was already spending the inheritance. The memory of the confrontation to come, the one from my kitchen table, echoed in my mind. Dad just lets that money sit in the bank. I'm putting it to use. His words, once a future sting, were now a present reality. He wasn't just planning this, he was living it. He was on vacation with my money, while I was still alive, while I was sitting right here. The betrayal was so complete, so breathtakingly arrogant, it stole the air from my lungs. I stared out the window as the rain began to lash against the glass, my reflection a pale, ghostly image superimposed on the storm. I had no doctor, a ticking clock that was about to strike midnight, and a son who saw me as a walking bank account to be cracked open. I was cornered and alone. But they didn't know the whole story. They never bothered to look closely at the things a man like me values, and they certainly never read the fine print. The next few days were a blur of dead ends. I tried 2 other doctors, but both claimed they were not taking new patients for VA assessments. I called legal aid, but their wait list was 6 months long. Each rejection was a hammer blow. Each closed door, another bar on my cage. Gary called once, his voice dripping with full sympathy. "Heard about Dr. Jensen," he said. "Terrible luck. Don't you worry, Dad. I'll handle everything." The pretense was sickening. My world shrank to the 4 walls of my home. The mail slot became an enemy. Each thud of a letter on the floor a potential new threat. The next VA payment was due to be diverted in 5 days. I found myself sitting in the dark, watching the dust motes dance in the slivers of light from the street lamp outside. The silence of the house was profound, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. It was the sound of a life winding down, of being erased. In my despair, I walked to the mantelpiece again. My hand hovered over the glass case containing the bronze star. I saw Gary's mocking smile, heard his voice. Bet it's not even real bronze. He had dismissed it, just as he had dismissed me, a worthless relic. The metal felt cold under the glass, a symbol of a strength I no longer possessed. It represented a man who could drag another to safety under fire, a man I no longer recognized in the mirror. That night, I couldn't sleep. The past and present were tangled in my mind. I thought of Carol, of her fierce, protective love. "You're tougher than you think, Ralph," she'd always say. Her voice was a distant echo, a faint light in a vast darkness. I felt a profound sense of loss, not just for my money or my autonomy, but for the respect a son should have for his father. My own child saw me as an obstacle, a problem, to be managed into the grave. On Thursday, with just 3 days left, a stroke of luck, or perhaps fate, intervened. Sarah, my neighbor, came over again, looking distressed. "Ralph, I don't want to cause trouble," she stammered, "but I work part-time at the Rusty Anger downtown. Your son Gary was there last night with some friends. He was loud." She hesitated, twisting a loose thread on her sweater. "He was bragging about you, about your money." She took a deep breath. "He called it unlocking his inheritance. Said he had a doctor friend who signed off on some papers saying you were senile, and that the VA fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. He was laughing about how easy it was." The words hung in the air, each one a poisoned dart. So it wasn't just greed, it was a conspiracy, and he was proud of it. The betrayal now had a witness. A cold fury, unlike anything I had felt since the war, began to burn away the fog of despair. It wasn't the hot, messy anger of youth, but something clear and precise. The objective had changed. This was no longer about defense. It was about a counteroffensive. I thanked Sarah, my voice steady for the first time in weeks. As she left, my eyes fell on the mantelpiece, on the bronze star. A half-forgotten detail surfaced in my mind. The medal itself was just a piece of metal, a symbol. Gary was right about that. But what came with it was not. When I received it, I was also assigned a permanent case liaison at the VA, a privilege for certain decorated veterans. A direct line, bypassing the usual bureaucracy. His name was Master Sergeant Kent, a stern but fair man I hadn't spoken to in years. I had a phone number tucked away in a dusty file box in the attic. The attic smelled of cedar and thyme. After an hour of searching through old tax returns and appliance warranties, I found it. A small black address book Carol had kept. Under V for Veterans Affairs was a name and a direct number, written in her elegant script. MSG Kent, direct line. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't legal aid. This wasn't a helpline. This was a call to the inside. The next morning, I made the call. Kent speaking. His voice was a gravied bark, exactly as I remembered. I identified myself, my rank, my service number. There was a pause, then the rustle of papers. Miller, Ralph. Hell of a long time, he said, his tone softening slightly. What can I do for you, soldier? I laid out the whole sordid story. Gary, Dr. Evans, the fiduciary letter, the looming deadline. Kent listened without interruption. The silence on his end was heavy, attentive. When I finished, he just said, "Fax me the letter." "And the doctor's name?" "Evans, you said?" I did, using the old fax machine in my study, that hummed to life like a sleeping giant. An hour later, Kent called back. "I've pulled the file, Ralph. It's exactly as you said. But I see something here. They're counting on you not knowing." He continued, his voice grim. "To be appointed a fiduciary based on medical incompetence, the VA has a strict protocol. The evaluation must be performed by a VA-contracted and approved physician. It's non-negotiable. It's on page 4, Section B, Paragraph 6 of the Fiduciary Handbook." My breath caught in my throat. I remembered Dr. Evans, my son's friend. He was a private physician, a specialist in cosmetic dermatology, of all things. "Your son's friend, Dr. Evans, is not on that list," Kent confirmed. "He never has been. The form your son submitted was fraudulent from the moment it was signed. He used a personal connection to bypass the entire system, assuming no one would check the credentialing. This isn't just a violation of procedure, Ralph. This is a federal crime." The pieces clicked into place with the force of a rifle bolt sliding home. The bronze star, the very thing my son dismissed as worthless junk, was the key. Not the medal itself, but the status it conferred. The direct line to a man like Kent, who knew the rule book, inside and out. The thing Gary overlooked was the very instrument of his undoing. My calm, which had so unnerved him, now solidified into something hard and sharp. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Now," Kent said, a grim satisfaction in his tone, "we contact the Office of the Inspector General. They take a very dim view of civilians defrauding veterans. And they take an even dimmer view of doctors who help them do it. I'm making the call as soon as we hang up. They'll take it from here. You just sit tight, soldier." That weekend was the longest of my life. I was an actor in a play, waiting for my cue. Gary came by on Sunday, all smiles and false concern. "Just wanted to see how you were holding up, Dad. Big changes tomorrow, huh?" "Don't worry. The first thing I'm going to do is get you a new TV, a big one." He was already redecorating my life, my home, with my own money. I just nodded, a faint smile playing on my lips. He glanced at the mantelpiece, his eyes passing right over the bronze star without a flicker of recognition. "Seriously, Dad? We need to get rid of this old stuff. It's depressing." It was his final insult, delivered with the casual cruelty of a man who believes he has already won. He couldn't see the silent, gleaming weapon aimed directly at his heart. He was too busy admiring the shine on his new boat. My plan wasn't just about stopping him. It was about holding him accountable. I went to the local VFW post, a place I hadn't visited in years. The smell of stale beer and old camaraderie hung in the air. I spoke with the post commander, a younger man from the Gulf War. I told him I needed 2 witnesses for a meeting at my house tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m. I didn't give him details, but he saw the look in my eyes and simply said, "We'll be there." On Monday morning at 9:15 a.m., 2 large, stern-faced men in VFW caps arrived at my door. They sat silently on my sofa, their presence filling the small living room with an unspoken authority. They understood duty. They understood betrayal. Gary was due any minute to gloat and, I suspected, to pick up the first check. He was walking into an ambush he couldn't possibly foresee. The roar of his sports car announced his arrival at precisely 9:29 a.m. He strode in, carrying a briefcase, a look of smug satisfaction on his face. "Morning, Dad. Ready for the new era?" His smile faltered when he saw the 2 men on my sofa. "Who are they?" he asked, his voice sharp with suspicion. "Friends," I said calmly. "They're here to witness the transition." He sneered, recovering his composure. "Whatever. You can have the whole post here. It doesn't change a thing. The law is on my side." He dropped the briefcase on the kitchen table and clicked it open, revealing a stack of papers. "Now, let's go over the new budget. First, we're cutting your ridiculous newspaper subscription. Everything's on the line now, old man." He was so confident, so utterly sure of his victory. Just then, a sharp knock echoed through the house. It wasn't a friendly knock. It was hard, official. I opened the door to 2 people in severe dark suits, a man and a woman. "Mr. Ralph Miller?" the woman asked, flashing a badge. "I'm Special Agent Davies, the A Office of the Inspector General. This is Special Agent Cole. May we come in? We have some questions for a Gary Miller regarding fiduciary fraud." Gary's face went from tan to a pasty, sickly white. The color drained from him as if a plug had been pulled. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He looked from the agents to me, his eyes wide with disbelief and dawning horror. The smug conqueror of a moment ago vanished, replaced by a terrified little boy caught with his hand in the cookie jar. A very, very expensive cookie jar. Agent Davies stepped into the room, her gaze sweeping over the scene. She held out a document. "Mr. Gary Miller, we have a federal court order here. It immediately invalidates your appointment as fiduciary, pending a full investigation into conspiracy to commit fraud against the Department of Veterans Affairs." She handed him the paper. His hand shook so badly he could barely take it. "And we have a warrant for all financial records related to your recent purchase of a..." Agent Cole consulted his notes. "A 28-foot Barracuda fishing boat." The air in the room was suddenly ice cold, the sunlight streaming in from the window, seeming to freeze in place. My son finally looked at me, a silent, desperate question in his eyes. How? I didn't answer. I simply let my gaze drift to the mantelpiece, to the small, dark box behind the glass. He followed my gaze. For the first time, he seemed to actually see the bronze star, not as a piece of junk, but as something else. The V for Valor device pinned to its ribbon glinted in the morning light. A flicker of understanding, a terrible dawning comprehension crossed his face. The connection was made far too late. He hadn't just underestimated his father. He had underestimated a soldier. Agent Davies turned to her partner. "Agent Cole, please escort Mr. Miller outside. We'll need to secure his vehicle and the briefcase as evidence." Gary was speechless, paralyzed. Cole put a firm hand on his arm. "Sir, please come with us." The touch broke the spell. "Dad, wait," Gary stammered, his voice cracking. "This is a misunderstanding. Tell them." But his eyes weren't pleading for justice. They were pleading for an escape. I remained silent, my hands folded calmly on the kitchen table, just as they had been during his triumphant speech. I watched as the VFW witnesses on my sofa stood up, their faces like stone, forming a silent, unmovable wall between my son and me. They were a jury of my peers, their verdict delivered in their stoic presence. There was nothing left to say. The time for words was over. as Cole led him toward the door. Gary's desperation boiled over into rage. "You did this," he screamed, twisting to look at me. "That stupid little metal. I can't believe it. After everything I did to set this up." He had just confessed, right there, in front of 2 federal agents and 2 witnesses. Agent Davies' pen scratched furiously in her notebook, capturing every self-incriminating word. They took him out to his ostentatious sports car. Through the window, I could see them reading him his rights. The neighbors were starting to peek out from behind their curtains, drawn by the commotion. The public humiliation he had so eagerly inflicted on me at the diner was now being returned to him, tenfold, on the quiet suburban street where he grew up. His kingdom was crumbling on the curb. Agent Davies stayed behind for a moment. "Mr. Miller, we'll also be paying a visit to a Dr. Evans today. His medical license is likely the least of his worries." She looked at me with a professional respect that felt like a balm on a raw wound. "The Inspector General's office takes care of its own. We'll be in touch to get a full statement, but for now, your benefits are secure and will be restored to your direct control by noon today." She paused at the door. "That bronze star," she said, nodding toward the mantelpiece. "My father had one. He said it wasn't for being a hero. It was for holding the line." She gave me a small, knowing smile. Then she was gone. Holding the line. That's what it had been. A long, quiet battle fought from my own kitchen table. After the agents left, the 2 men from the VFW post stood to leave. The commander put a hand on my shoulder. "You need anything, Ralph, you call us, day or night." They hadn't said more than a dozen words the whole time, but their silent solidarity spoke volumes. They were brothers in arms, men who understood the sacredness of a promise and the deep stain of betrayal. The house was quiet again. The sunbeam had moved across the room, now illuminating the empty space where Gary had stood. The oppressive weight of the last few months lifted, leaving behind a profound stillness. It wasn't triumph I felt, but a deep, quiet sorrow. A grief for the son I remembered from the rowboat, the boy I had lost somewhere along the way, to him becoming a man. I walked over to the table and picked up the court order Agent Davies had handed to Gary. It felt solid, heavy, a tangible piece of my reclaimed life. The elegant legal phrases spelled out a simple truth. The fight was over. The document wasn't a weapon anymore. It was a shield. It was the proof that my mind, my worth, and my honor were still my own. The scent of Gary's expensive cologne lingered faintly in the air, a sour note in the familiar comfort of my home. I opened a window, letting the clean, cool morning air rush in, sweeping away the last trace of him. Outside, the world was carrying on as if nothing had happened. A dog barked. A lawnmower started up down the street. Life was returning to normal. I thought of Carol once more, imagining her sitting in her favorite armchair. I could almost hear her voice, calm and clear as a bell. "You held the line, Ralph. It was all the validation I needed. My fight wasn't just for me. It was to honor the life we had built together, a life of integrity and quiet dignity that my son had tried to dismantle for parts." My phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text alert from my bank. "A direct deposit of $4,200 from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs has been posted to your account." It was just past noon. Agent Davies was as good as her word. The number on the screen wasn't just money. It was a symbol of my restored independence. A period at the end of a very long, painful sentence. Later that afternoon, I drove down to the marina. I didn't go in, just parked where I could see the slips. I saw it almost immediately. The Barracuda, gleaming white and obnoxious, already bearing a large yellow sticker from the Marshal's Service. A seizure notice, the fruit of his crime, now evidence of his folly. It looked small and cheap against the vastness of the water. Staring at the seized boat, I didn't feel anger or satisfaction. I felt a hollow ache. The boat was a monument to his greed, a physical manifestation of everything that had gone wrong between us. He hadn't just tried to steal my money. He had tried to steal my dignity, my memories, my right to live out my final years in peace. He had valued this thing more than his own father. I went home and did something I hadn't done in years. I took the bronze star out of its glass case. The metal felt cool and solid in my palm. I polished the glass, wiped the dust from the cherry wood frame, and placed it back on the mantelpiece. Not in the back, but right in the center. It was no longer just a memory of the past. It was a testament to the present. The legal process would unfold over the coming months. There would be trials, restitution, and consequences for both Gary and his doctor friend. But for me, the war was over. I had faced the ambush, held my ground, and used the enemy's own arrogance against him. The quiet war fought in my small home was won. I sat on my porch as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the lawn. The air was cool, and the scent of cut grass hung in the air. The familiar rhythms of my quiet neighborhood were a comfort. I had my home. I had my honor. I had my peace. He had taken so much, but in the end he had failed to take what truly mattered. My gaze fell upon the row of mailboxes at the end of the driveway. Tomorrow the mail would come. Bills would arrive, and I would pay them. My pension would be deposited, and I would manage it. These small, mundane acts of self-sufficiency had been elevated, transformed into symbols of a hard-won victory. They were my rituals of freedom. I picked up the court order from the table one last time, folded it neatly, and placed it in a drawer with my other important papers. I didn't mean to look at it anymore. I closed the drawer with a quiet final click, the sound echoing the turning of a page, the closing of a chapter. Then I walked out into my garden to watch the last of the evening light fade from the sky.